Here in Tampa, Florida, we're covering the GOP convention here with former UN Ambassador John Bolton. Ambassador Bolton, it's good to see you in person, sir.
Well, glad to be with you here in Tampa.
Let's talk first about the latest Fast and Furious news. I don't know if you saw this story that Fast and Furious operative Bill McMahon is double dipping. He's extended leave from the ATF, which we're still paying for, but he also has a job at JP Morgan, which, by the way, we bailed out for $12 billion. And JP Morgan has the contract for the ATF's government credit cards. Ambassador Bolton, how crazy can this story get?
Well, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, when I was in the government, I was always very clear that you could not have sources of outside earned income. When you work for the government, you work for the government. So I don't even understand how this is permissible. But even if it were, it really reflects, I think, very poorly on the ATF that they would allow this to happen.
What do you think, when you walk around here, people ask you about Fast and Furious and the United Nations. What do you think is the biggest concern about the United Nations right now, and especially in the second Obama term?
Well, we still have this arms trade treaty hanging out there. This issue about efforts by gun control advocates to use international treaties to get domestic regulation of Americans' firearms is something that has been a real problem for some time. And I think in a second Obama term, once he's through with these pesky voters, his inclination to do more in the international field will be very, very strong. So I think the risk, it's been a big risk in the first term, I think it will be a bigger risk in the second term.
NRA, of course, has an all-in campaign to get President Obama out of office. What do you recommend NRA members do? Anyone watching or viewing right now, door-to-door, donations, what do they do to help in this effort?
Well, all of the above. I think this is going to be a close election. I think that's the best we can predict today, and I don't think anybody wants to wake up on the day after November the 6th and see a narrow Obama win and say, if only I had done a little bit more, maybe the outcome would have been different. Now, we're all in different circumstances. We've got time or money, or we've got whatever we've got, so there's no uniform rule, but I think everybody ought to do a little bit extra this time. This is not a normal election. This is the most important election for president that we will have had in a long, long time. And if we allow Obama to get a second term, we've only got ourselves to blame.
Mr. Bolton, can I make a simple question about the United Nations? There is such an anti-Israel bias in the United Nations, but Syria is on the Human Rights Council, and they allow the worst actors, the worst countries around the world to dictate laws and regulations and their thoughts to countries like Israel and the United States. How nuts is that?
Well, I used to say sometimes when I walked across First Avenue in Manhattan to go to the UN compound that it was like entering the Twilight Zone, where things happen there that are just inexplicable to most common sense Americans, and those are some good examples. The hostility to Israel, the hostility to the United States is very real. It colors everything that goes on there, and the only way you can counter it really is to state very clearly and firmly what America's position is and not act like a well-bred doormat.
Bastion, I'm sure you've heard the phrase many times, get the UN out of the US, get the US out of the UN. It's never going to happen. It's just not realistic. So for people who feel that way, how can they better channel their anger and frustration?
Well, I think the most critical thing we could do at the UN is change the way it's funded. As they said in Watergate, follow the money. And in the case of the UN, to move away from mandatory contributions where we basically pay 22% of most UN budgets, 27% of peacekeeping, and shift to completely voluntary contributions. We pay for what we want, and we expect we get what we pay for. That would be like a tsunami through the UN system if the U.S. contribution weren't an entitlement.
In a Romney-Ryan administration, what do you see as as dealing with the UN, especially picking their ambassador? How do you figure it would be better for the United States?
Well, I think they'll find people that are not going to apologize for the United States, that don't feel guilty about America protecting its own interest. In the UN, there's 193 members. Every one of them defends their respective national interests. There's only one that gets criticized for it, and that's the United States. I don't think that would trouble the Romney administration, and I think that would send a signal around the world that America is going to protect its interests, it is going to protect its friends and allies, it's not going to be pushed around.
Last question, Ambassador, on Fast and Furious. What has to happen for you personally to feel some satisfaction, some vindication? What has to happen in Fast and Furious, do you think, for the American public to feel that justice has been done for the Brian Terry family?
We need complete open of what happened inside the federal government. I, to this day, don't believe that the Attorney General of the United States presided over an operation that extended into another country that he didn't know about until the scandal broke in public. I worked for Ed Meese at the Justice Department. He knew all the details, especially anything that involved a foreign government. And so I don't think we know the whole story. I think Darrell Issa and others have worked hard, and I certainly applaud everything they've done. Obviously, they've been stonewalled by the administration. We need to break through that and continue until we find out what the truth really is.
Ambassador Bolton, thanks for your time, sir.
Oh, thank you. Glad to do it.